situation at SAA. I'm now joined in studio by aviation analyst Desmond Latham from Freight Intermedia. Des, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Peter.
You know, we're busy trying to unpack this situation. And I suppose this collision between management and staff was on the cards for some time.
We've been talking about this for some time, you and I, and on this program a few months ago we discussed exactly the same kind of questions that were coming up when we were chatting about Boeing, for example. So yes, this is now a crisis actually for those involved in aviation, because it's our main airline that is facing bankruptcy.
Labour is saying that management and the board are to blame, and I wonder, is the board fit for purpose?
Well, if you look at the numbers, I'd say no. I mean, the numbers are very clear. 2017, 18 billion was owed by SAA. That number is now 28 billion. That's 10 billion rand in 2 years. They were given 5.5 billion at the beginning of this year. Now they've asked for 2 billion more. If this was a listed company, the shareholders would have fired them.
So one has to believe that capable, qualified people are put on these boards. What could be at play? What kind of pressures could be at play that decisions are being made that keep putting us into this situation?
Well, I think one of the things that's obviously political, because the unions are very powerful. And what's ironic is these state-owned entities were created by apartheid. And people seem to have a big problem getting rid of them. So we're sitting with really anachronistic kind of business operations that come off a kind of nationalistic ethos that doesn't work in the 21st century where we are. So SAA, I believe, can be saved, but I think there's significant action has to be taken. And now there's a crisis upon a crisis, because we have no time left to do much to deal with this. Martin Kingston today was using the phrases liquidation, bankruptcy. Now, this is a point at which the unions, 10,000 odd workers, must face facts here that they can't keep saying we want bonuses and raises as if there's a vacuum of reality going on here for everyone. We're at the point now where hard decisions are going to have to be taken, and I'm afraid it's going to be quite destabilizing.
So often you hear executives talk about tough economic conditions, and all through this I'm thinking, but hang on, Comair has been making money ever since it started years and years and years ago. What is it that Comair is doing right that SAA isn't?
Brilliant question. The management know how to do aviation. That's the simple answer. The management at SAA seem to have a problem, and the board at Comair knows how to manage the executives in aviation. Comair hedges its fuel costs. In other words, it has people who understand how to work the system to make money. Comair makes very little money per passenger. It's around 10 to 20 rand per passenger. They make a lot of their profits out of the fuel because they're buying so much fuel. SAA doesn't seem to be able to manage itself in the same way. So I think that's the quick answer, is that the people inside Comair are actually, they're obsessed about aviation, they understand aviation. The problem at SAA is we've had deployed people inside that operation who've damaged it, and it has to change.
So if one looks at the balance sheet, I mean, this is an insolvent company. Had it been private, it quite likely would have been liquidated by now. Can it be saved? Or do we say, do you know what, let's cut our losses and try and flog this?
Well, when there were stories about Hong Kong denying SAA landing about a year and a half ago, I started investigating that question. And I realized there are three scenarios, and they still exist. The first is that SAA declares bankruptcy and looks for a buyer. Now, the buyer is going to buy the debt, so that's going to be quite tough. The second one is they cease operations entirely, and the third one is government bails them out again. And any of those are still out there for action. I mean, they have enough money to operate until today, 1 week, the 20th of November. Then they stop, or they get the 2 billion rand from government. There's going to be a showdown at OK Corral moment in the next 7 days. There are going to be unions and operators on one side staring at government on the other side. Who's going to blink? That's the reality of the situation. We're in a place now where they cannot continue flying without the money. The creditors are going to come and get them. Going to get their planes, the 54 planes that are owned and leased by SAA. That's a lot of capex. That's billions of rands there. So you can see that the SAA can be saved. But I wonder who has the will to actually do that inside the system.
So it seems as if the board, the shareholder, have some tough questions to answer, but at the same time, Labour is threatening the mother of all strikes, indefinite rolling mass action. Wouldn't that then actually threaten the very jobs they're trying to protect?
The answer is yes, but then Labour is not the only one threatening strikes. The pilots are threatening the strike. These are not technically Labour. Well, they are, I guess, but they are white-collar Labour, if you like. The professional people at the front of the aeroplane. They're also threatening to strike because they say clearly, and they've said this, put this on record, that the management needs to be changed. It's top-heavy, and they don't know what they're doing. And that's clear because the numbers prove that. So it's a tough thing to say, but if you look at the numbers, if you just sit back and say, what's happened to the operations? If it was you and me running a company, we would be on the street long ago as managers. So the question has to be, yes, Labour and the Cabin Crew Association, as well as the Pilots Association, are now taking extreme action. But that gives you an idea just how serious it is. There are people inside a barrel bobbing in the river to go over the Niagara Falls any second now. They realised, all of them, that their jobs are now on the line, and for all of them. Because once bankruptcy is declared, then it's crisis management. They won't be the first national airline to declare bankruptcy, by the way. There are many have declared it, because it's an old-fashioned idea is to have a country run an airline, unless you can subsidize in different ways, like Emirates and Dubai, or like Ethiopian Airlines, for example. And they, of course, have a GDP in Ethiopia of 7 to 8%. Our GDP is flatlining virtually. So there's economic problems we have on top of this.
So then how does Ethiopia Air get it right?
Well, again, they've built their system from the ground up carefully. They've also got world's best kind of actions taken internally. They looked at technicals. They looked at kind of deals and swaps. And also, they are halfway up the African continent. So they get traffic from east to west that we cannot get. So their business model is like an entrepot. It's like a Dubai. In other words, they become an area where planes pass through. So they've got a lot more action going for them there than we do here. They can get planes from India, land in Ethiopia, and then fly on to the USA. So we don't have the luxury. So there are real geographic problems for us as well. But that's not to say that we can excuse the actions taken by the board, and Adudu Myeni in particular, and by the management, which doesn't seem to have the spine to take the tough action that is required. This is a crisis.
So make you CEO for SAA. What are the things that you would do in the next year?
Okay, the first thing to do is to understand that 24% of the costs come from labour. So I have to address that. 27% of the costs come from fuel. I have to address that. Between those two, we're looking at over half the cost of the entire airline. This is not capex, this is not the food, this is just all the airport costs, any of those. That's the significant numbers you have to address. So as a manager, as a strategic leader, I'd go after those two. Because you win one of those two, and then you're on the road to success, and then a bank will bail you out because you have a track record of over 100 years. You have a policy in place that is backed up by a principle that says more people in Africa are traveling by air than ever before. It's a burgeoning industry. We can still capture that.
And then do the telecom thing and sell off part of the airline.
Yes, the funny thing for me is that, as I said to you just now, it's an apartheid creation. I don't understand why this government and this country doesn't understand that they cannot make changes inside monopolies to make things better for the majority. 58 million of us are paying tax to subsidize SAA and Eskom and Transnet. Surely, between us, we can get that airline right.
Desmond Latham, we pray that they listen to what you're saying. But thanks so much indeed for your insights. Thank you.
Peter. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you on Your Story.